So I think it's interesting. I always follow narratives, and the narrative right now is very much on this inflation, ongoing growth, how the Fed going to raise rates, they have to taper soon. But the work that I've been doing suggests that the likelihood is the economy, the global economy, slows down pretty significantly into next year. And again, we might see more stimulus and more fiscal stimulus coming as well. So I look at it very differently to what most people are seeing. But on the horizon, because of like the fiscal cliff, we've got like 3.5% of GDP coming off from the fiscal cliff. We've got all of the spending brought forward that everybody, including me, did up their houses over the previous year. We've also got the fact that oil prices have gone up. That hits household expenditure. Prices in general hit household expenditure. You see these weird old things like the University of Michigan surveys about cars, houses, and durable goods. Because the prices all went up, basically they've gone to all-time lows in terms of affordability. So people are stepping back. We're seeing it in the housing market. We're seeing it all over the place. So these higher prices are kind of a cure for higher prices, as is often the case. And I think that that's going to lead to much slower growth than we expect. And again, as I said, more stimulus.
And so when we get slower growth and more stimulus, does that continue to drive the prices higher and higher? And it's almost like a negative feedback loop, because as the prices go higher, growth slows and we become more and more dependent on that kind of that external stimulus?
I'm not sure that prices go higher. That's a supply-driven issue that I think eventually disappears. Assets go higher. And that in itself has been a problem, something you and I have discussed, because if you can't buy a house because you're 32 years old and your income doesn't go up, because nobody's income is really going up, then you're kind of getting screwed. And that's one of the whole premises behind, why I got very, very interested in Bitcoin early on, was seeing this play through. And I think it's just going to continue. I think there's so much debt in the system. There's so much leverage. I think the world is now 400% of GDP in debt, that governments have now realized, and the central banks, that they can't let the collateral go bust, i.e. the asset side of the balance sheet is not allowed to fall in price, because if not, you get a big margin call on the economy. So it seems to be that debasement of currency to drive assets higher optically is the only answer they've got now. There's almost no way around it unless they can generate growth that is higher than previous trend for a longer period of time. And with this aging population, all of this indebtedness, globalization, technology, the chances of doing that are low.
So one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about is, if you look at like a Chipotle, let's use them as a proxy for kind of hourly wages. They raised wages 3 to 4%. They then pass that through to menu prices up 3 to 4%. But if you look at somebody like, I think it was BlackRock, they increased the firm-wide salaries 8%, so almost double. And so you almost get this like bifurcation. You get kind of white-collar workers where they really understand inflation, et cetera, much higher increase, but at least they both increased, right? So there is some negating of the levels of inflation. When you start to think about the everyday person, whether they are a white-collar worker or they work an hourly job, or maybe they're coming off of unemployment and just now kind of coming back into the workforce, what is likely to be kind of their experience if we continue to see asset prices go up, wages don't necessarily go up nearly as much, and the government steps in? Is this in the form of just more kind of unemployment boost and direct stimulus checks, and we eventually move towards like a UBI world? Or is there something else that you think this could take the form of?
I don't know, and I don't think anybody's figured it out. Yeah. But the problem is, as you're saying, it's right, wages don't go up enough. The other thing that's missing from that wage construct is the fact that all the boomers are retiring in record numbers. So that's offsetting the amount of total demand in the economy, because a bunch of people go on no salary apart from on their savings. They didn't really save that much. And then a few others get wage rises. But if you look at the debasement of the fiat currencies overall, that's going somewhere around 13%, 15% a year. So that's driving up asset prices at a minimum of 15% a year. So even if your wages go up 4%, you're the Chipotle worker, well, suddenly you still can't afford as much of the S&P, and you still can't afford as much, a house and all of the same things. So you're still getting net poorer. So what is an asset? That's the important thing for people to understand here. An asset is basically deferred expenditure. So you stick savings into something that you hope goes up enough in price to offset inflation and other things, and then eventually you get to spend it by selling that asset. Now, whether that's gold or whether it's a house, particularly if it's a second home that you're trying to rent out or do that kind of stuff. So those assets, which are your future wealth, are becoming harder to buy, so you can buy less of them. So you are net getting poorer. And I don't know how you're going to solve that equation. I think the next bet is that fiscal stimulus will do it, but I don't think that's going to be the case, because the Chipotle worker is going to be laid off by robots. And it's as simple as that. We're seeing it in McDonald's, we're seeing it in many places. So between artificial intelligence and robotics, you're going to be competing for salary with somebody who gets exponentially cheaper in price, because computing power gets exponentially cheaper. So it's a really, really difficult situation. So I think they're going to continue with the same path for the time being. By the time the next recession comes, then I think that's a full rollout of UBI, because there's no way around it. I don't see how you rescue this situation by doing the same thing again and again. We know the outcome. We've seen it since 2008. And nothing's going to change with that.